Hey guys, welcome to Market Monthly, and we're going to go into basically just a wrap up of everything that's happened in the last month. So, before I get right into it, I'm going to do a quick dad joke for you. So, what does a dog and a cell phone have in common? They both have caller ID. Caller ID. All right, so getting right into it. So, over the last month, rates for the most part kind of stayed plateaued, but for the most part, there has been some changes that have caused rates to get a little worse. But for the most part, I think that's happened within the inflation reports and things like that have had the response that we wanted, just not as big of a response to the other things that we've seen. So one of the first things that we want to say is that all the inflation reports that we've seen has all come down, which is a great thing. There's three inflation reports that come out every month at the same time every month, and we saw that each of them all have come down, which is a great sign. However, the tough thing is that what the information is. So to give you guys an idea, this is kind of like the trend of inflation, but it hasn't been really updated for this current month. But I wanted to tell you guys that the inflation reports for both PCE, which is production consumer index, producer consumer index, CPI, which is core producer index, and PPI, producer price index, all those inflation reports have gone down by between 1% to 0.5%. So a lot of big changes from month to month. Now, these are what's called year-over-year numbers. So inflation has come down, and each of these reports come out about the same time every single month. So what's happening is every month we're seeing these inflation reports come down. Now, the reason why these inflation reports are coming down is because of the Fed's action within the last year to bring down inflation, which is raising the Fed funds rate. Them raising the Fed funds rate is the goal, to bring inflation down. However, it does take time. It takes about 6 to 9 months for those things to react, which is kind of why we've been seeing that when they raised the Fed funds rate last year in March, it wasn't until November where we started seeing the plateau and inflation started to come down. So that's a good sign. That's what we really needed in our economy because inflation was too high. Now, what's great about inflation coming down is that mortgage rates come down with it. Now, there's a lot of talk of what's going to be happening in the July meeting. July, and for the Fed, they are trying to figure out, should they raise the Fed funds rate any further? Well, here's the tough thing, is that over the last year, since they've started addressing this inflation, they have changed the goalposts in which they measure what their goalpost for the inflation report is. So again, there's three types of inflation reports, and within that inflation report, there's two ways to measure that inflation report as well. So there's a lot of ways to measure the trend and what we expect to see with inflation. So for example, imagine you're trying to get healthier, but the way you measured how to get healthier is based on your weight. And then all of a sudden you changed it and you based it on, I don't know, your skincare routine, right? Totally different goalpost. So that's what the Fed has done in the last 12 months, is that they changed the goalpost. So now they're looking at an inflation report that's, for some reason, it's going to it's going to be more difficult to get that inflation report down to 2%. And that's their goal. So when they stated inflation, they wanted inflation to be at 2%. They said it was core CPI inflation, which it's getting there, but it's going to take a bit. Now they changed it to PCE. So the goalpost keeps changing with which inflation report we're going to be reading, and basing that 2% goalpost would be the end goal. So that's what's tough about what the Fed is doing and the decision-making process. So they're going to have a Fed meeting this month to decide if they're going to, raise the Fed funds rate any further. My personal opinion, I don't think they should do it anymore. Just let the economy fix itself. It's almost like nature. It'll figure itself out, and it has. For the most part, inflation last year was double what it was this year. So it's making quite a bit of progress in just since last November. So that's one thing. Now with mortgage rates, that's one thing I want to show you guys. So with mortgage rates specifically, it's kind of tough to watch, to be honest. So I'm going to show you guys my screen when I can get there. So this is affecting what mortgage rates have done in the last year, basically. But the main thing we want to look at is from here to here. So we've seen basically kind of plateau, and then some of these nice big bumps, but it dropped down quite a bit. Most of these drops are centered around the inflation reports coming out. So as the inflation report shows that it's coming down, mortgage rates basically respond immediately, which is a really nice thing to expect when you're trying to figure out when to lock. Now, what's tough is that when we see these big bumps, and what's this big bump here? Well, this was because of one report and had to do with the jobs report. The jobs report caused a really big stir, and the reason why the jobs report specifically that we're talking about is called the initial jobless claims, which means the people filing for saying that they don't have a job. Well, that number fell, which means this indicates to the rest of the investors who are trying to figure out where to put their money is to figure out, is the economy doing well? To them, when the initial jobless report shows that it's coming down, that means the economy is doing well, which means they're going to sell their mortgage-backed securities, which cause rates to go up, and buy stocks. And that's kind of essentially what we're seeing. And you've probably seen, stock prices kind of go up a little bit. It's if you guys who are following those kind of the charts, the stochastics, things of that, you'll see it started trending toward the overbought direction. So that's what's kind of tough with random reports that come in, and there's so many things in between these inflation reports when they come out that could drive rates up and down. But what's nice is that in the overall scheme of things, most part is that mortgage rates will follow inflation. So if you kind of look at this chart, since basically the early 70s, you kind of see that as inflation goes up, mortgage rates respond a little bit later, maybe a month or two later, but for the most part, they do have a trend of, the inflation went up, so therefore, mortgage rates have gone up following that. But as inflation comes down, so did mortgage rates coming down as well. So long term, inflation does follow mortgage rates. In the interim, things can move the market quite a bit. Just like you see here, this apparently was 1994, so we were in a weird, I don't know what happened in 1994, but for example, inflation was slowly coming down. So we can kind of see that, there might have been a weird blip in the economy to show mortgage rates going up. However, overall, they still went down on the grand scheme of things. And that's what we really need to be patient about, is there's still an expectation to see fives again in the end of this year. We're just waiting for mortgage rates to really follow the trend of what inflation is doing. Inflation has dropped quite a bit in a short amount of time, just like it did here in the early 80s. So as it drops down in a short amount of time, it takes a bit for it to respond, but it did respond. So that's what we're looking forward to. And hopefully we see the trend of seeing 4% again in 2024. Now, the next thing is, again, each inflation report is coming down. So that's what's nice. It usually comes around, the first two reports come around the 10th to 13th. And there's the last one basically at the end of the last Friday of the month, essentially, where the last report comes out. Now let's talk about appreciation. Now, appreciation is kind of tough. It depends on where you're at. Now, when we're looking at the quarterly average, national average, it's about 0.75%, which is really tough to look at. But you have to keep in mind, there's a couple things that impact this. We have low inventory, so not enough homes are selling to really impact the inflation reports. The homes that are selling are typically on the lower end of the spectrum. Not to say the home prices are dropping, but the homes that are cheaper, that still had appreciation, are selling more. And then the other thing is that we have high rates right now. So rates have been basically plateaued. In November we were seeing high sevens and low eights. Now we're seeing high sixes and low sevens. Because of that, that's still providing some kind of a shock to the buyers out there. And if we change another percent, that's going to have a lot more people be eligible to buy a house. So if we look at the quarterly average from quarter two, we're looking about less than 1%, which is tough to look at. But what's good is that there is some appreciation. Now, depending on where you're at, you can kind of see that. So there's some of it's a little negative and some of it's a little more positive. Now, if we look at the year over year, we're still within range of the 3 to 5% average, which is still fine. The West Coast are taking the biggest hit because they have the highest purchase prices, which is really tough. So highest purchase price means people either sell or buy, but have to drop their purchase price from the year before. Just to keep you guys in the loop and with the perspective is that beginning of 2022, within those 3 to 4 months of 2022, we saw 20% appreciation. And then it dropped down to 10 near the end of the year. So overall, I feel what I'm seeing is kind of a rebalance of a crazy, unmanageable appreciation rate. And that's what I'm seeing on my end. But you can still see that a lot of people flocking to the Midwest, and all of this is time. It's going to flux back and forth. So stick with it. It's not going to be like this forever, but it's something to keep in mind of as you're kind of planning your business and try to uh, figure out what to do with your money and if you should buy or sell. Now, the last thing is what's to come. So, what's to come in the rest of the year? As I mentioned before, mostly the expectation is still to see 5% by the end of the year, maybe high fives by the end of the year. But if you kind of see the trend of basically just last November, what we're seeing is that rates were in 7.5 to 8%. And then now, about 8 months later, now we're basically 1% lower from that range. And then if we're sticking to the same trend, especially with how fast inflation has come down, by the end of the year, we should expect to see the same trend, which is a really good thing because that gives opportunity to refinance for a better rate, or also even for those even more home buyers to come into the market. Now it's tough. Not gonna lie, it's a very tough market. I have clients that have their home on the market for the last 3 months. Mostly it's because of home price. They have to sell at a certain price to make money, and there's a chance they have to even lower it more and have to come with some money in pocket. The other thing that I'm also bringing out to a lot of my past clients is a potential opportunity to refinance. Well, why would you refinance in such a high interest rate environment? Well, it's only one specific situation, and if you're only going to look at your mortgage in an isolated way, refinancing for a better rate for that specific mortgage and doing nothing else, I wouldn't do it. Don't touch your rate. Don't touch your mortgage. However, the one time where and even another way where a refinance does not make sense is if you're taking money out for renovations. I'd probably recommend getting some kind of home equity line of credit. I have one. It's actually a great tool to have. It's like a secured credit card by your house, and it is, you can do whatever you want. It's pretty great. I personally use it for short-term investments. Now, the way it does make sense if you're consolidating a lot of debt. So if you have a lot of personal debts, I would say upwards of 50K or more, maybe 60K or more, it actually may make sense to, even though your rate is maybe triple to what you have now, it actually might save you quite a bit of money. I actually ran a scenario, did a video to a lot of my past clients where the scenario is this actually was an actual client of mine. He went from a 2.25% interest rate to 6.5%. Crazy, right? But because he consolidated like $130,000 worth of debt, he actually saves about $1,100 a month by consolidating his debt. So $100 a month makes a lot of sense. Again, it's a very specific scenario where it does make sense. Obviously, personally, I would only do it if it was saving them a decent amount of money per month. So it's something to consider. And I've had some out with my past clients. I've gotten a lot of responses, so hopefully that works out well. But that's basically all I got for you guys for the market monthly. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. What do you guys think is going to happen in the market with home appreciation? We feel like I feel like there's this plateau between buyers coming back and homes coming on the market. We are seeing multiple offers again, and homes being bid up higher. Inspections are at the point where they potentially may be waived, which is personally not a fan of that. But maybe there's some relief coming in soon. So that's about all I got for you guys. Hopefully you guys are doing well and and not having any issues. But if you do, I hope for the best and hope you can get through this potentially tough time. Otherwise, that's all I got for you guys. Nuke out.